a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening to you. It is 7 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The United States says yesterday's armed rebellion in Russia was a direct challenge to Vladimir Putin's authority and reveals cracks appearing in his military strategy. The mutiny by the Wagner mercenary group was called off last night. It's understood its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, will be exiled to Belarus. His fighters were en route to Moscow to remove Russian commanders Prigozhin blames for mishandling the war. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says the turmoil caused by the rebellion could take months to play out, but is likely to affect Moscow's capabilities in Ukraine.
To the extent this presents a distraction, a loss of focus for the Russians, that may help the Ukrainians on the battlefield. Exactly where this goes, we don't know. But what we do know is that we've seen real cracks emerge. Again, a direct challenge to Putin's authority.
And while the immediate risk appears to have been contained, emergency security measures do remain in place in Moscow, as Russian journalist Alexei Veer told GB News earlier.
Everything has been resolved. It seems that the catastrophe has been avoided. We still do have some extra law enforcement here on the streets, and they are wearing some heavy gear, for example, bulletproof vests and helmets. They have machine guns, which is unusual. But as you can see here, life continues. The situation here in downtown Moscow doesn't seem any different from the usual. The Red Square is still closed, but other than that, everything seems fine.
A 15-year-old girl has died after being pulled from the sea at Cleethorpes Beach in Lincolnshire. A 15-year-old boy who was also airlifted to hospital has since been discharged. Separately, a 5-year-old boy has died after falling from a harbour wall in the Cornish town of Padstow. Police are treating both incidents as accidental. Now, the Duchess of York is recovering following a successful operation to treat breast cancer. Sarah Ferguson was recently diagnosed with an early form of cancer after a routine mammogram having been symptom-free. She was released from hospital earlier and is now recovering with her family in Windsor. Doctors say her prognosis is good. And in a few hours' time, it will be goodbye Yellow Brick Road for good, in this country at least. Sir Elton John will close the Glastonbury Festival by headlining the Pyramid stage. It will be his final UK gig, 53 years after his first. Now, Sir Elton's promised a number of special guests and also to open with a song he hasn't played in the last 10 years. That gets underway at 9 p.m. And this is GB News. Now, time for Free Speech Nation.
Vladimir Putin is having a bad week, school children are identifying as cats, and the boss of Bud Light wins Marketer of the Year. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and of course we'll have the latest from those lovable culture warriors and their tireless quest to suck every ounce of joy from human experience. Coming up on the show tonight, Stella O'Malley and Joseph Burgo from Genspect will be here to tell me about a new think tank being launched to help with gender-related distress. We're going to hear about a nasty melee this week at Speaker's Corner, which is supposed to be a bastion of uninhibited free speech. We'll ask what the ramifications could be for freedom of expression in Ireland as a bill on new hate crime is about to make it into law, and it's pretty disastrous. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our lovely studio audience. I'm going to introduce them right now. I've got Diane Spencer and Leo Kearse. So, how's it going? Good week, Leo?
Yeah, it's good.
What have you been doing?
Attempted a coup on Edinburgh. I got to Carlisle, then decided to call it off.
And have you sort of made some sort of deal with Nicola Sturgeon?
I'm going to be exiled to Wales.
Could be worse. I don't mind Aberystwyth. Rhyll's quite nice.
Oh, I've never been to Rhyl.
It's fine. It's got... Well, anyway, Diane...
I've been to Mould.
You've been to Mould?
That's a place in Wales.
Is that a real place?
They've got a lovely art centre.
OK.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere in Britain or the UK that isn't, like, sort of named after some sort of fungus?
Do you know, there's a couple of little villages near where I live, and they're called Beer and Droop.
Is that real?
Yeah.
Goodness me. OK, well, look, I think it's about time we get some questions from the audience, because this is far too trivial for me. We're going to start with a question from Eden. Eden.
That's me.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, a question. Is this the beginning or end of Putin?
Yeah, OK, well, we've all been thinking it. Vladimir Putin, as you know, has had a particularly bad time this week with the mercenaries known as Wagner. At first, looking like they were going to stage a coup, and then they reached some kind of deal, and Prigozhin ended up making a deal saying he's going to go to Belarus. Now, Leo, we were thinking for a while there this is like shades of 1917, you know, where the army were basically saying to Nicholas II, get out.
And Putin even said that himself.
Right.
He brought up, I mean, for somebody who's supposed to be a strongman dictator, he brought up that.
That was
and compared himself to that.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, like, him going off to Belarus, I mean, it's not going to... I mean, Trotsky went to Mexico. It didn't work out for him. I mean, is it not the case that when people do these kind of putches, these attempted coups, they tend to lose their heads, don't they?
Yeah, and
in Russian history, I mean.
I don't understand why Prigozhin called it off. Whatever he's been promised, I mean, a promise from Vladimir Putin isn't really worth the paper it's not even printed on. No. Because, as we can see with Ukraine, he promised, he was never going to... There's the Budapest or Bucharest or whatever agreement, he wasn't going to invade Ukraine, and that didn't work out for Ukraine. So, yeah, I don't understand. Prigozhin, he had his military on the outskirts of Moscow, 70 kilometres from the centre. He could have just gone in and, he even said on the way up, he said, I think he said he was going to hang Shoigu and Gerasimov, so the defence minister and the head of the army.
Yeah, his beef was with the army people. It wasn't with...
Well, he also
really
said there was going to be a new president. So I don't know if his backers, he must have had some backers in the Russian establishment, if they'd been nobbled by the FSB or whatever, shadowy spies.
Yeah, but it's weird, isn't it? Because if you go that far and then you back out, it's like a death sentence on yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely is. And, I mean, we have to to remember that the Russian military, there is the Russian military, but that it's actually fragmented into about 6 or 7 private military corporations.
Yes.
And one of these is the Wagner Group, but there are many others.
Right.
So it's quite intense. I'm not sure what like the statistical numbers are, but he has his own army. I mean, when he goes to Belarus, and we already know the Belarusian president is quite happy to just yank planes out of the sky if he wants to grab a journalist off them.
Yeah.
There is no way that guy, Wagner, Prigozhin is going to be safe there. I mean, for goodness sake, Litvinenko was assassinated in a London sushi bar.
Yeah, but he must think he's safe.
Yeah, but it says to me that there is something else going on, and it's not to do with Putin. It says to me that there are other people around Putin which are actually the key driving force, and Prigozhin has been talking to them. They have...
Right, OK. But the big question now is Putin himself safe? Is his authority secure? Because it's kind of a reminder, isn't it, that in order to sustain power, you need to keep the army on side. This is why whenever Roman emperors came to power, they doubled the army's salary. Yeah. Because they knew that otherwise they'd get killed.
Yeah, especially if you're a sort of strongman dictator, you've totally got to have the army on side, and also you've got to have the country on. People have got to believe in your strength. Yeah. And this has really been a sort of Wizard of Oz moment for Putin. It's revealed that he doesn't even have the strength to stop them marching all the way to Moscow in a day. And like remember when Ceausescu came out in the balcony and he told everybody to shut up, and nobody shut up, and that was the moment everybody realised he was weak and they had the power over him, and he was gone. 4 days later, he was gone. He was executed.
But Putin's already looking a bit weak since that Victory Day parade, where he had one tank. I mean, I see more than one tank where I live. You know, it's like that's not very much.
Where do you live?
Well, in Hertfordshire. But you can rustle up a second tank. But the point is, like, he's looking weak, is my thinking.
He is looking weak because also he did something very uncharacteristic for Putin. He got angry on television.
Right, yeah.
And that was such, I mean, good grief. Girl's lip was quivering. She was shaking. She was very, very angry.
Wow.
And I have never seen her behave like that before.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be so interesting. What I've really enjoyed about this is this all happened so quickly, and none of us really knew who Prigozhin was a few days ago, but all these commentators have had to sort of pretend that they were all over it.
No, but we have been watching this. We've known who Prigozhin is for ages.
Yeah, we have, because we're in the business.
Well, we've been like, yeah, and then everybody's like, Wagner? Is it the music? Should we play the... No.
Yeah, it's a lot of people playing catch-up at the moment. OK, well, look, we're going to get a question now from Jim. Where's Jim?
I'm here.
Hi, Jim.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My question is this mob called Just Stop Oil.
Yeah.
Do you think the time's done for them, the tide's turning?
It could be, because Trevor Nielsen, who was a co-founder of Just Stop Oil, he has now said that he doesn't really support what they're doing anymore. I think their tactics have really not necessarily gone down particularly well, because they keep annoying the people that they're trying to persuade. You know, they keep stopping people from going to work. They keep gluing themselves to priceless works of art. I mean, surely it is the case that if the co-founder is now saying, guys, it's not working, then isn't it all over?
Not at all.
Why?
Because, to draw an analogy from an 80s film, he is the Mogwai, the protesters are the gremlin. Do you see what I mean? Although the protesters have come from him, they are not him. They are gremlins. They are now running in and causing havoc.
This is a very niche 1980s film reference.
I so recommend you see it.
Yeah, Gremlins is fantastic.
Yeah, and essentially what has happened is he is cut off from them. It has taken on a life of its own. If they are going to recruit from universities and they're going to target young people that they can stir up into this kind of hateful fervour where they're like, yeah, let's just burn all the oil paintings because we need to stop oil. Like, some of them, I bet, don't even know what they're protesting.
No.
I think some of them think they're protesting oil paintings.
They're also posh. Like, what I don't understand is, if you're going to have this movement, why not just get them to put on working-class accents so they don't sound like they're so you know, because they seem like they're so superior to everyone.
It's going to look like the musical Oliver. They're like, come on, Tarquin, let's go and set fire to Cheltenham.
They've all got names like Hugo Ponsford and Ponsonby and...
Well, obviously, working-class people have got jobs,
right?
So they don't have time to go and sit in the street or glue themselves to a bus.
No.
So, yeah, like, working class people got things to do.
Do you think it's working, their campaign?
No, absolutely not. I mean, maybe if they went and, I don't know, blocked the roads to Glastonbury, I'd have some respect for them, but they
Well, they can't because half of their mates are going to that.
Exactly, yeah. And with Just Stop Oil, you've got to follow the money. They're not some sort of ideological group that are trying to make a better world. They're paid by green energy barons to advance an agenda that makes those green energy barons rich. So Dale Vince, the founder of Ecotricity, is worth over £100 million. He funds Just Stop Oil. He also funds the Labour Party. So Just Stop Oil go out and make it look as if there's this huge public upswelling and support for the green energy that Dale Vince provides. And he funds the Labour Party to pass policies that make him rich. He gets tens of millions of pounds in taxpayers' subsidy, or rather his company does. And also they pass policies. So Keir Starmer said, I'm going to stop North Sea oil and gas. That's basically like a sort of mafia move, going in and shutting down the competition.
Yeah, but are you suggesting there's a causal link there, and that Keir Starmer is changing policy on the basis of these backers?
Well, if somebody gives you a bunch of money and then you do what he wants you to do, I mean,
that could be coincidence, Leo. That happens to me all the time. It's just pure coincidence. OK, we're going to move on now to a question from Gwen. Where is Gwen? Hi, Gwen. How are you?
Should the Rye College be investigated after the cat gender row?
Yeah, Rye College. I'm glad you mentioned the name of the college. So this is this college. You must have heard it, this recording of the teacher berating the two girls about the fact that they wouldn't respect their peer who identified as a cat. And now, Kemi Badenoch, who's obviously the Minister for Women and Equalities, has now said, she's written to Ofsted. In fact, I saw the letter, it was on Twitter. She's written to Ofsted, so it said, maybe Rye College ought to be investigated because that belief that there are two sexes, that those are immutable, that's actually protected by law ever since the Maya Forstater case. But the thing is, Diane, now there's been a lot of stories and anecdotes this week about children identifying as cats, right? Apparently this is a thing. Catherine Birbalsingh, who's the head of Michaela College, has spoken to teachers who have a cat in their class, and the cat is allowed to lie on the floor and responds to meowing, right? But you've also had the Telegraph did a report this week which was saying that there was one pupil they found who was identifying as a horse. There was another who was identifying as a dinosaur. There was one who's wearing a cape and identifying as a moon, right? Now, I think what's going on there is those pupils are being satirical. I think they're joking because the adults have sort of gone along with this.
Yeah.
And because the adults sort of have bought into this nonsense self-ID stuff, the pupils are just testing it. They're like, OK, if I can be whatever gender I want, I can be a moon.
Kids are absolute wind-up merchants.
Yeah, of course
That's what they're going to do. As soon as you give them a rule and they can see the flaw in that rule and they can see how it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Like, I used to be a teacher. If I would have gone in, and if these rules were here these days, I'd have walked in, I'd have had Noah's Ark right in front of me. I'd have had zebras, lions and tigers.
And you couldn't say anything as a teacher because I know you're not authentically a zebra.
But you can.
Yeah, you can. Of course you can.
You can. And this is why Kemi Badenoch wants to have this investigation, because she, I think, like many of us, are absolutely appalled that the teacher showed no sign of the ability to discuss, the ability to debate.
Well, she said they were
despicable.
Yeah, they said they were despicable.
Which is awful.
Because they know the difference between a human being and a cat. Is that despicable?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've seen the state of modern kids. They're pretty obese. So I think to identify as a moon,
that makes sense.
I've seen a few kids that genuinely could exert a gravitational pull in the tides.
Yes, in a sense, they're more like moons than children.
Yeah, I think this is all a drive to make because I mean, so many kids are being put into this sort of transitioning pipeline. It's to bring down the cost of surgically transitioning the kids, because if they identify as a cat, you can get a vet to do it.
Yeah, but also, at lunchtime, so they're allowed to sleep, they're allowed to meow, do they get fed cat food?
No, they wouldn't touch that. It's not very nice.
Well, they should, because they're cats.
Yeah, they need to prove that they're cats.
It's actually higher grade meat than normal school dinners.
Yeah, that's probably true as well.
Yeah, it's meat.
It is a nonsense. Anyway, we're going to move on now to a question from Chiara. Where's Chiara?
Hey.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask if the Aussies are right to question Elon Musk.
Yes. Now, you're an Aussie yourself, aren't
I am
you? Yeah,
indeed.
you said it with an edge.
Yeah.
As in, you don't want us to criticise your homeland.
I mean, I've been questioning Elon Musk for years, so I just want to know if I'm right, basically.
This is because, of course, Elon Musk, as you know, taken over Twitter, and he's basically said, look, we're going to have free speech on the platform. He's brought back lots of accounts that were banned for no good reason, sometimes just because they knew the difference between a man and a woman. And now various countries are saying, no, we want the censorship back. And Australia's one of these. Australia's basically saying they're going to fine Elon Musk up to $500,000 a day unless he starts censoring people they don't like. He might just say, come on then, let's see what you got.
Yeah.
I'd love to see the Australians try and fine Elon Musk, see how that works out.
Well, he is a bit like a guy who just already owns a Lamborghini, so parks it wherever he likes because he can afford the ticket.
Exactly.
But what I found interesting, I investigated this report, and they only interviewed 4,800 Australians. So let's start right there with the fact that their sample group is tiny.
But isn't Australia quite small? Isn't that like half the population?
You're thinking of New Zealand.
Oh, okay, fine.
So, and also, the last report was in 2019, and they were making all the comparisons between online hate has radically improved since 2019. Yes, we had a pandemic in between.
Yes.
Calm down, darling. But also, Elon Musk didn't take over Twitter until 27th of October 2022. So they seem to be pinning a lot on Elon, whereas this report covers that whole amount of time.
That's interesting.
I think it's a very weak report.
But also, I don't see any evidence of this rise in hate speech. I think a lot of the people are just sort of saying, we're seeing opinions we don't like.
Yeah.
And that counts as hate speech, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hate speech is such a nebulously defined thing. It is basically, I mean, it basically means something that you don't like, something you hate. So
yes,
you can't really sort of legislate against it. You can't objectively define it.
But should Elon Musk be taking a stand when these countries come in and say we need more censorship? You know?
Well, then you end up, and this is what tech companies do. They pander to every corporation. So, I mean, Google and all the different tech companies, what they offer in China is obviously vastly different and censored compared to what you get in the West.
Yeah, that's true. They do make different rules for different countries. You know, it does happen. Okay, well, we're going to go on now to another question from Jackie. Jackie, hello.
Hello. Was Winston Churchill a white supremacist?
I knew him well. I think he had some issues. No, look, the thing about this question comes up again and again because there's for some reason the activists always constantly go after him. This is St. Paul's Cathedral. There was an article on the St. Paul's Cathedral website which was up for a year calling Winston Churchill a white supremacist. Now, why is it about Winston Churchill they're always going after? Isn't like the fact that he beat the ultimate fascist, Adolf Hitler, doesn't that give him some kudos?
Well, not just the ultimate fascist, but the ultimate national socialist, which is so obviously, for a lot on the left, Adolf Hitler is their hero, and that's why they try and emulate his anti-Semitism. But yeah, Winston Churchill, I think, because for people of a certain age, he was. We grew up thinking he defeated the Nazis. He's this great guy. So obviously, anybody on a pedestal, literally on a pedestal, he's on the top of. They've got statues of him in some places. They want to tear him down.
It's very odd, though, isn't it? Because there's no attempt to contextualise. I accept that he would have had views that we don't find acceptable because he was born a long time ago and people had different views and views change over time. So what is it about the activists that they can't understand historical context, that they're always judging people from the past by their own standards? Do they not think they're going to get judged? I'm judging them right now because they're all idiots, but in 100 years' time it's going to be even worse, right?
Well, it's very strange that it was also on the Church of England website, because do they not preach forgiveness?
Wait, that doesn't surprise me at all. The Church of England's gone very woke, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Really badly, I would say.
Yes, but aren't they supposed to be like forgiveness and trying to see the lighter side of life, always look on the bright side? Aren't they supposed to be like that, or have I got confused with a film?
And that's Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Right, there we go. OK, good.
No, you got that one wrong. OK. Listen, those have been some excellent questions. We have got some more coming up from the studio audience later in the show, and also still to come, I'm going to be talking to Stella O'Malley and Joseph Burgo from Genspect, who are going to be here to tell me about the new think tank they're setting up to provide care for gender-related distress.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The Genspect group is an international alliance of professionals, trans people, detransitioners, parent groups and others who seek high-quality care for gender-related distress. The group has recently announced they are establishing a think tank which will develop an alternative to what they see as the flawed standards of care promoted by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPATH. The think tank will create a non-medical guide relying upon contributions from experts and leading thinkers in various fields impacted by gender ideology, and that's due to be published in November this year. So here to tell me more, I'm pleased to welcome Genspect Director Stella O'Malley and Vice Director Joe Burgo. Thank you both for coming. Stella, I'm going to come to you first about this. Can you explain what WPATH is and your relationship with them as Genspect?
WPATH is an organisation that was started in the late 70s, and they were kind of a motley group of trans people and professionals who were working in the area. And they were created to promote transgender health, to help people who are transitioning. And over the years, they tried to stay as a professional group, and they tried to stay kind of halfway serious. But by the early 2000s, they were overtaken by activists. And that is arguably why activists are running everything these days to do with gender health. And so as we studied it, we started Genspect as a response to this extraordinary gender ideology just creeping everywhere, from cats to schools to young children who have some terribly harrowing stories, and families are being ripped apart because they're, transitioning too early and they're not able to make these, permanent decisions about their bodies. And so we started Genspect as a counter organisation. And we realised that not only do we need to have a counter organisation that offers a different view to how you could be gender diverse, and people could be kind of, for example, they could live a very gender diverse life without medicalising. You don't have to medicalise. But also we had to show that because WPATH, their entire kind of way of operating is #no debate. They don't debate. They shut people down. They absolutely defame people, or certainly they make very little of an awful lot of people's reputations. And as a result, arguably, an awful lot of people have been cowed and silenced. And so we started to say, well, we're going to have to offer something, and we're going to have to go head to head with them. And we have created, as you said, a think tank that kind of is putting what we think are the best minds together to talk about gender in a more rational way and in a healthier way, because our approach to gender is a healthy approach to sex and gender, i.e. create a framework where people can be diverse. Maybe little boys can run around in dresses, but nobody wants to call him a girl, and nobody is making him take puberty blockers or offering a fast track of a medicalised pathway. And so we're creating a gender care framework, and we're going to release it as such at our next conference.
So I'll bring Jo in at this point. It's very interesting what Stella's saying about the activists, insofar as there have been sort of transgender groups in the past that weren't captured by these activists. If you go back 12 years, mermaids even were saying quite sensible things in their promotional literature about how, for the most part, puberty resolves a lot of these feelings of gender dysphoria in childhood. But now they do have this kind of strident activist quality, and as Stella says, no debate. They will lie about their opponents. They will smear them. They're just not interested in participating like adults.
No, not at all. And that's why we are going to them. We're following them where they're holding their conferences and saying, yes, debate. We will debate. We will present a totally different point of view to yours at the same time and in the same place. This is what we did in April in Killarney. We had a conference with educators, lawyers, feminists, a lot of detransitioners, all presenting an alternative perspective to the one that was being talked about just down the road, with a group of medical professionals talking about how you administer puberty blockers and when's the best time to do surgery and hormones. So we just go up against them and we present a completely different point of view, and we insist that, yes, there will be debate.
So activists will say, but, you know, there are people who suffer from gender dysphoria. They need support, and actually the best way to support those people is to affirm whatever they say that they feel that they are. Is that not right?
Activists say that. They don't have any evidence base to support that. You can say an awful lot of things in life, and it doesn't mean it's true. And what we have found is this affirmative concept, it came in about 10 years ago. There's no long-term evidence. We don't actually know what it is. What is going to be the impact of all of these kids being affirmed? We don't actually know. Nobody knows. So anybody says they know, they're not telling the truth, because there is no long-term evidence. But what we do know, because I'm a psychotherapist and so is Jo, we know that if somebody comes in deep pain, we would affirm that they're there. We would affirm the depth that they're feeling. We'd affirm that they want to be a cat. We would affirm, you know, whatever they want. You know, and obviously most people don't come in wanting to be a cat.
No, that is quite rare, I think.
No, that is extremely.
But it's more
hasn't happened.
It's more like you say, effeminate boys being convinced that they're actually in the wrong body because there's only one way to be a boy, or vice versa.
Or like little butch lesbians who haven't yet discovered that they're a lesbian, who feel very masculine, and as one girl, you know, said, I'm not pretty enough to be a girl. So there's so there's some really kind of sad, vulnerable people who are like, I don't like my body, I don't like who I am, I don't know my sexuality, I don't know where.
It's quite normal though for adolescents, isn't it?
It is. But it's a hypersexualized world we're living in, and there's a lot of demands on teenagers, like, well, are you gay? Are you not? Who do you fancy? And some of them haven't had a sexual awakening. And if you ask a kid before they've had a sexual awakening, who do you fancy? It's creepy, it's icky. They don't want to, but it's been pushed upon them.
Yeah.
So it is hard on them.
It's very interesting, though, isn't it? Because this sounds to me like a very kind of ultra-conservative viewpoints of what it means to be male and female, and the idea that your sexual orientation is somehow related to your biological sex. We know from Hannah Barnes' book on the Tavistock that between 80 and 90% of adolescents who were referred to that paediatric gender clinic were same-sex attracted. So to what extent is this ideology just kind of fixing gay people, making them straight?
Well, that's my big concern. And, you know, what you're saying is it's very regressive. These are very regressive gender roles. I mean, a boy who likes to wear a dress is actually a girl. I mean, 40 years ago, we were trying to expand the possibilities for gender roles. And now we've got these very rigid roles, and you fit into either one or the other. My big concern is that camp boys are being transed. And, you know, we're dealing right now with these big conversion therapy bans saying that if you challenge someone's transgender identity, that's conversion therapy. I would say that what's going on with affirmative care in JIDS at the Tavistock, that's the conversion therapy. They're taking butch lesbians and camp boys, and they're saying, you're born in the wrong body, and we're going to fix you, and we'll make you normal.
So it's interesting, because I've met a number of detransitioners. I remember one in particular who was just an effeminate gay man, very young, but when he was an adolescent, he was persuaded he must be a girl because he was camp, and now he has no genitals. I mean, that's the problem here. The stakes are very high, and you will have worked with a number of detransitioners. I mean, the surgery that some of them have had, I mean, it can ruin people's lives.
It's devastating because, you know, there's a comical aspect, and we can all look online and it's kind of funny. And then you actually meet the people who bought into it, that they could be a different person, that they could change their body and have a different name and nobody would refer to the old person. I remember one girl who was a detransitioner. So she medically transed at a young age. She took puberty blockers, took testosterone, masculinized her face and her body, and she had a mastectomy. And I remember her saying, you know, I had a mastectomy and before anybody had ever touched my breasts in a loving way. And so it's kind of like she'd had no sexual experience before and now she had a mastectomy, so she never will have a loving.
But people will be shocked by the very idea that a mastectomy for a healthy adolescent female, that's even going on. People will be sceptical about that.
Yeah, people will be sceptical about it, and it is happening. It's not happening under 18 in the UK, but they hit the ground running at 18 because they've been so intense. And they have really, an awful lot, like we've talked about the gay and the lesbian, they're definitely a large proportion, but a lot of these kids have autism, and they have a very literal understanding, and they genuinely think this is going to be the solution to all these unsettling feelings of alienation and hating my body and feeling uncomfortable. I'm going to be a boy and I'll be better. I'll feel better. So there's a harrowing stories of detransitioners, and you know, we had about 15 of them at the last conference in Killarney. And, you know, there was a panel and they all said their stories, and you just realise, oh my God, it's the most vulnerable people who are getting caught up in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jo, we don't have much more time, but could you perhaps tell us how people can find out more about Genspect, about the think tank, and maybe your next conference?
Right, genspect.org. We've got all sorts of resources for parents and educators and people. We've got a program for detransitioners. We subsidize psychotherapy. We have alternate programs for them. It's all on the website, and our next conference is going to be in Denver, Colorado in November, opposite the other WPATH conference at the same time, and we'll likewise be bringing people together from politics and education and all different fields to present an alternative view.
So no matter what WPATH wants, there will be a debate.
There will be a debate.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Stella and Jo, thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Still to come on Free Speech Nation, Speaker's Corner is meant to be a bastion of free speech, but this week a melee broke out when one row got particularly heated. A Speaker's Corner regular will be here to tell us more. See you in a moment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Back to Free Speech Nation. So later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Diane Spencer and Leo Kearse, and we're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any problems whatsoever, just drop us an email at gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we will do our best to answer your problems. Speaker's Corner is the area in Hyde Park considered the oldest free-speaking platform in the world, having hosted decades of speeches since the mid-1800s. But its reputation as a safe haven for free speech and opinions of all varieties came under threat this week when a heated discussion erupted into, well, an actual brawl, and this required the police to be called. So Speaker's Corner regular Steve Chilcott was present at the time, and he joins me now. Steve, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. You've been on the show a few times, and of course you've been going to Speaker's Corner for an awful long time.
Longer than I care to remember.
Right, so it means a great deal to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why don't you tell us what happened last Sunday?
So, unfortunately, we had the return of some quite vicious violence last Sunday, when one of the very regular Christian preachers at the corner was very violently and aggressively attacked. Started with a shove, he ended up on the floor, fists were going, kicks were going in. His Christian preacher friends were attacked by a mob that landed upon them.
When you say a mob, how many are we talking?
I mean, there was a melee going on, frankly. I would say there was 20 plus people.
Were the police there?
There was no police there at the time that it happened. They were called, they arrived 5-10 minutes later. And I have to say, they were not interested. The aggressors were pointed out to them, they were identified, people were showing them videos of the attack on their phone, so they knew the individuals who were still standing there as bright as anything in the park. The police did not even approach them. They didn't take their names, they didn't take their identity, they didn't speak to them.
So the whole point of Speaker's Corner is anyone can stand up and say anything they like, irrespective of how controversial it is. What was this Christian preacher saying that caused so much upset?
They were arguing about whether Jesus is God.
Okay, so a theological speech.
Typical theological discussion that goes on, week out at Speaker's Corner. Nothing contentious, no... You know, we know what more contentious things could have been said. There was nothing remotely contentious.
So who were these people attacking? Was it a group of militant atheists or something?
Or Buddhists. I think they might have been Buddhists.
Oh, yeah.
No, they weren't. They were Islamists. The one guy, the main protagonist of this attack, who I've since discovered, is a Lebanese-born Islamist Sunni preacher who has said some pretty vile things. He said things like 9/11 was an insider plot. He said Jews deserved the Holocaust. It was God's retribution to them. He said George Bush, and I'm no great fan of George Bush, but he says George Bush is a devil-worshipping Illuminati that deserved or created everything.
He's a crazy
so
man.
He's an absolute crazy nutter. We'd not seen him at Speaker's Corner before, but clearly he came with a large crowd of people who ended up inflicting physical violence on people.
Would you say that this man was inciting the others to inflict this violence?
Some of them there, I think, were probably his bodyguards, his security.
Right.
They were big butch guys that were standing with him throughout his time at the corner, and they were very active in the violence.
Yeah, but the thing is, with Speaker's Corner, like, you would even justify a man like that, a sort of crazed Islamist preacher, standing up and saying what he wants.
Yeah, exactly. However unwholesome or unpleasant it might be, of course, I would be the first person to say they have their right to come to Speaker's Corner. Anyone has their right to come to Speaker's Corner, deny the Holocaust, come out with whatever crazy nonsense they want. The tipping point is the violence. The tipping point is the fists and the feet.
So surely, I mean, I would have thought that the police, and from my limited understanding of what goes on, the police are meant to be there every week, aren't they?
Well, precisely, and they are. So I was saying to you a moment ago, so Posey Parker, Kelly J. Keane was there today, had a completely peaceful gathering of the Let Women Speak. No trouble, a very, very large police presence. So the police pick and choose when they decide to enforce calm and
Well, it's interesting because a couple of months ago, when the Let Women Speak group were in Hyde Park, the police were nowhere to be seen. In fact, Graham Linehan filmed them walking away when the women were kettled in by aggressive men in masks.
Well, precisely, but every month, so mainly they go there at the last Sunday of every month to Speaker's Corner, there's been a huge police presence, and it's been very, very well policed.
So has that been because there was a backlash to the police negligence?
Well, that's the precise word for it. It was negligent last Sunday. It was negligent that time when Graham videoed the police officers walking away.
Yes.
And I think there was a very, very large backlash that I understand went to the Home Office, went to the Home Secretary level.
See, what I don't understand about this is when it comes to the religious question, when it comes to radical Islamism, I mean, we've seen a Christian preacher stabbed in Hyde Park, and I believe she was arrested.
Well, precisely. Hatun Tash, who has been knocked unconscious on one occasion, who's been stabbed in the neck on a second occasion, was herself arrested by the police. She subsequently took them to court and won £10,000 compensation for wrongful arrest. So, again, they are very quick to jump in and arrest certain perpetrators.
Just to raise the spectre of Rotherham, we know that we had these rapes and sexual abuses going on because the police did not want to arrest people from a certain community because they would be accused of being racist. Is the same thing happening here? As in, radical Islamist preachers can incite as much violence as they want because they don't want to be accused of racism?
In my view, the Metropolitan Police Force are one of the worst culprits for the inconsistent application of the law.
Right.
We've seen it with Just Stop Oil. We saw it during lockdown, where they treated different protest movements very, very differently. So I remember one Sunday during the latter times of lockdown, you know, they had vans, they clamped down on anyone stopping momentarily and speaking at Speaker's Corner. Yet at the very same moment, across the road in Marble Arch, there was a Shia Muslim gathering and celebration. Right. So at the very same point in time where they're clamping down on lockdown there, they're not clamping down on another area.
But is there a problem here when you have certain speakers and people who hold certain ideological beliefs where free speech itself is against their values?
And this is the issue, that at Speaker's Corner, which we all know and respect as the home of free speech in this country, is so inconsistently policed. Whereas, Christian preachers are arrested when they are the victims.
Yes.
Yet these thugs, violent thugs, I mean, the guy that I was referring to, the Lebanese preacher, he had a crutch with him, which he was repeatedly bringing down on people's heads.
So that's assault.
Well, precisely. It wasn't just a push or whatever. It was vicious, violent attacks. And there's that guy, and the police are shown videos of the crutch coming down on people's heads, and they don't even go and take his name.
I mean,
something's not right.
Well, you just need to apply the law irrespective of who is committing the crime, because surely this is very patronising to Muslims to suggest that, well, if there are groups within that community breaking the law, you should leave them alone.
Well, precisely, because, what we're talking about here at Speaker's Corner is a vile group of extremist Islamists. We're not talking about good, normal British Muslims who share the same views as us about the benefits of the culture that they live in here, and quite frankly are equally appalled by the police's behaviour.
Well, because it's particularly bad for them, because what happens is this is a gift to certain far-right groups who want to paint Muslims as inherently violent.
Right, it's giving them the ammunition for their hate.
OK, well, look, Steve, I'd love you to come back and keep us updated, because it seems as though Speaker's Corner, I think, is such an important place that we need to preserve, but there's always something going on.
It's a microcosm of the world's greater problems, frankly.
Absolutely. Steve, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Well, still to come on Free Speech Nation. As one of Ernest Hemingway's greatest works is slapped with a trigger warning, we're going to ask about the implications for the publishing industry and if such warnings are ever justified. Don't go away.
I I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. The work of the great 20th century American author Ernest Hemingway has been given a trigger warning due to concerns over his language and attitudes. Publishers Penguin House have reissued his novels and short stories with a cautionary note. For example, his famous debut novel, The Sun Also Rises, has a disclaimer now which says publishers will not censor the book, but nor do they endorse the content. These warnings have major implications for the publishing world and beyond, and here to discuss them, I'm joined by the writer and historian David Oldroyd-Bolt. David, welcome. Now, I have to be honest, this is the latest in a long sequence of similar stories. We've had warnings splashed on Agatha Christie, P.G. Wodehouse, Roald Dahl, now Ernest Hemingway. Is anyone safe?
It seems a rather odd thing that a publisher should be expected to endorse the content of a novel. After all, it is make-believe. You know, nobody is going to expect that when you're reading Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, you think it's a really good idea that someone should go around in a big cart collecting children. Nobody's going to expect when you read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that you think it's really great to punish children in the horrific ways that Dahl describes. These are works of fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, you say that as though... they should know this, working in the publishing industry. What do they make of Stephen King? I mean, do they endorse Killer Clowns? I mean, do they have to
run and hide in a cupboard by any means? I think it's a really odd concept too that when you take something like The Sun Also Rises, which is written in 1926, is set just after the First World War and is about Hemingway and his friends, but is very clearly set within a fictional realm, that there should be a need at a century's remove to remind people that this was written a century ago.
Yes.
I mean, all they have to do is look at the front and see that it was written a long time ago.
I think...
And people thought differently in the past. There's this bizarre idea that everything should be rewritten to make it relevant to the current day. And to me, that strips away all of the joy of reading fiction. When you read, say, Clarissa from the 18th century, or you read the works of Trollope from the 19th century, or you read the works of P.G. Wodehouse, we mentioned, from the early 20th century, you do so in part because you want to know what it was to live in a different age.
Yes.
Even if, in the case of Wodehouse, these are highly fanciful ideas about a very narrow selection of that age. But you don't do it because you think that you're somehow going to find a reflection of the current age.
But it all seems so arbitrary. I mean, the authors that they choose, you mentioned Clarissa, the Richardson novel, but, you know, there's a rape and she dies in that, but sorry to spoil it, but there's no warning on that as yet. There's no warning on some of those classics. But what I'm saying is that will that now become the norm, do you think?
Well, I think if the publishing staff, who it does seem from... We've had analogous cases, for instance, with Nigel Biggar's book on colonialism, where the original publisher, Bloomsbury, the staff went mad about it, and so it had to be published by someone else. It seems that it's a publishing staff driving it, rather than necessarily the executives. So if they start to extend this weird fear and also control, I don't see why it shouldn't apply to the entire canon. But it seems to me a very strange thing to enter an industry which is primarily about telling stories and then to try to control the way in which those stories have already been told. You know, we're not talking about contemporary works of fiction. That's a rather different discussion, and I think one that's good for a future programme, Andrew.
Yes.
We're talking about things that have been published for, in some cases, centuries. So what do they expect to achieve by this?
Am I being mean by maybe suggesting that maybe the people making these decisions don't read very much? Because, you know, the fact that it's almost as though they've just come across Hemingway,
indeed,
and they've just realised, what will they make of Titus Andronicus? What will they make of Ovid's Metamorphoses? They'll have a heart attack.
Well, I think they probably have never read those things. Right. And if they have, they've misunderstood them. It's an extraordinarily odd thing. We think it's 60 years, 61 years, in fact, since the trial of D.H. Lawrence's book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was only published, despite being written in 1928, it was only published in an unexpurgated form in 1960.
Yes.
There was a trial. It was prosecuted on... The publisher was prosecuted under the Obscenity Act of 1959, and then, the judge... after taking evidence from people like E.M. Forster and many other literary luminaries of the time, said there is a clear work of artistic merit here. That was the trial during which famously the prosecuting counsel said, is this a book that you would wish your wife or your servants to read? So we knew what kind of viewpoints we were dealing with at that time.
Yes.
And so I'd have thought that for the past 60 years, we've had it as a fairly well-established fact that even if you dislike the content of something, it should be allowed to be published. And if you don't like it, you don't have to read it. Retrospectively, to go back and to be trying to, as in the case of Ian Fleming's estate, the writer of James Bond, themselves to be changing the language,
yes,
I think is a very odd thing, because that is a distortion. If you think it's really necessary, if you think your readers are so stupid that they can't understand that books published a long time ago express different points of view in different languages, if you really think it's necessary, then fine, put a little warning on it. But to start rewriting, as some authors' estates are doing, I think is a really quite dangerous trend.
I mean, it's interesting, the rewriting thing. I mean, there was a backlash when they were starting to rewriting P.G. Wodehouse.
Yes.
The very idea that these sort of 20-year-old activists pretending to be publishers can write better than Wodehouse is hilarious to begin with. But then there's a difference between that and maybe putting a warning on. But even the warning troubles me.
Yeah.
Because the implication behind it is that these books are sort of potentially dangerous.
Yes.
And that they have to kind of paternalistically look after the public. That's their job. It's not their job.
Well, that in itself is, I think, a rather old-fashioned idea, and it's curious that they should be existing together. Now, I wonder if they would, for instance, support the reinstatement of the role of the Lord Chamberlain, who between 1737 and 1968 had the power to censor any play on the British stage for content in case it somehow offended someone or was obscene or was blasphemous. I mean, it does seem that we are moving backwards in our ability to appreciate a variety of artistic expression. It seems that we're moving towards, again, a time when people can control the thoughts of others because they think it's good for them. And now, who is saying that these people have the right? Why not you or I or your viewers?
Yes.
How is it that these people, this self-selecting guardianship, have decided that only they are morally pure and intellectually strong enough to decide who reads what?
And isn't it fascinating, because they would consider themselves to be progressives?
Yes.
But they're behaving like the Star Chamber or something. They seem like the old-fashioned stuffy pearl clutchers from yesteryear, the ones who took D.H. Lawrence to trial.
Well, I would say it has historical references and resonances with other things like, say, the Inquisition, which people remember the Spanish Inquisition because of Monty Python, but in fact it went on for hundreds of years, and still today there is a list of books that the Vatican has banned. It's prescribed that, you know, they're not being burnt anymore. But we've seen in many regimes throughout history that once ideas are controlled, once there is an idea that some things are so dangerous as ideas that they can no longer be read, you start to go down a very difficult path about the free expression itself. And what concerns me here is that they're beginning with language, they're beginning with those particular touch points of today's language, race and class. And I just don't think that there's a possibility of it ending there. And I think this is another instance where the slippery slope is not a logical fallacy. It's a very clear indication, and we've seen this in so many instances recently. Once control is exerted over language, which is a principal method we have of expressing our ideas, those ideas themselves become circumscribed and indeed proscribed.
David Oldroyd-Bolt, thanks ever so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. OK, that's the end of our first hour on Free Speech Nation, but there is much more to come, including discussion of the Windrush generation, the Irish hate crime bill, and more questions from our brilliant studio audience.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this evening, including a discussion about the enduring significance of the Windrush generation, analysis of the Irish hate crime bill, and more questions from our live studio audience. But let's get a news update first from Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you very much. Yes, good evening to you from the GB newsroom. The US believes yesterday's armed rebellion will weaken Vladimir Putin's government and the Russian war effort. The leader of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, will be exiled to Belarus and stripped of control of the mercenary fighters after his short-lived mutiny ended last night. But the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the unprecedented challenge to Putin's leadership has exposed fresh cracks that may take months to play out, but they could aid Ukraine's counter-offensive against Russia.
To the extent this presents a distraction, a loss of focus for the Russians, that may help the Ukrainians on the battlefield. Exactly where this goes, we don't know. But what we do know is that we've seen real cracks emerge. Again, a direct challenge to Putin's authority. A 15-year-old girl has died after being pulled from the sea at Cleethorpes Beach in Lincolnshire. A 15-year-old boy who was also airlifted to hospital has since been discharged. Separately, a 5-year-old boy has died after falling from a harbour wall in the Cornish town of Padstow. Police are treating both incidents as accidental. The Duchess of York is recuperating following a successful operation to treat breast cancer. Sarah Ferguson was recently diagnosed with an early form of cancer following a routine mammogram, having been symptom-free. She was released from hospital earlier and is recovering with her family in Windsor. And one of the longest farewell tours in history will finally come to a close tonight, in the UK at least. Sir Elton John will headline the Pyramid Stage at Glastonbury later. It will be the first time he's played the festival and his final UK gig, and almost the end of a 5-year-long farewell tour. He's just got Zurich to go after this. Now, the performance will feature as yet unannounced surprise guests, and some superfans have been queuing up since 4 a.m. for front row spaces.
Turned up 3 hours after these guys. I was here at 7 a.m. I was third in the queue, and you can't miss Elton John. Last ever UK gig, Glastonbury. What a day.
Look, I kind of kept the tickets initially, but just for like Elton. So I figured like this is such a once in a lifetime chance that I can sleep any other day, but like front row Glastonbury last UK concert, that's probably going to be like a once in a lifetime chance.
It has been almost perfect Glastonbury weather, hasn't it? But the Met Office is warning people to enjoy the heat responsibly. It's after the forecaster recorded the joint hottest temperature of the year. Earlier, 32.2 degrees in Coningsby in Lincolnshire, equalling the figure in Surrey earlier this month. Thunderstorms and heavy showers, though, are expected for some parts of the country later. TV, online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. Now it is back to Andrew and Free Speech Nation.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's get some more questions from our lovely studio audience. Our first question is from Ivan. Where's Ivan? Hi.
Hi. Could men at work signs cause offence?
OK, so this is South West Water. They've been criticised after ordering a review following a complaint about this men at work sign, and apparently it's a reminder of the constant undervaluing of women. Diane, I'm going to come to you as one of the two women on the panel. Are you offended by the sign men at work?
Do you know what? I'm confused
Okay.
because it says to me that this director who spotted it doesn't have access to a black Sharpie, because if he really felt that strongly about it, just run up to the sign with a felt tip and just doodle on it and put "and women."
Yeah, but wasn't it just men, though?
Well, I don't know, I wasn't there.
Right, okay.
But, like, I think they've got more important things to do than worry about the sign. Like, we're dumping raw sewage into the sea. I think if this is the water companies, could we fix that?
This is an interesting one. That men are disproportionately represented in manual labour work, aren't they? And so more often than not, it is just men at work.
Yeah.
Why aren't feminists doing more to sort of make that more 50-50?
Well, break the sewer ceiling? Get more women into the sewers and on the oil rigs? I don't know. For some reason, the feminists just seem to want the nice stuff about being a man. I can't work it out. I mean, I think the most offensive thing about the sign is for some sort of public sector, Quango organisation, whatever, and it says men at work. I'm willing to bet they weren't doing any work. They were sitting drinking some tea out of a flask.
There's going to be 4 of them smoking smoking, and one of them will actually be doing something with 4 dudes going, he's doing that wrong.
Goodness me. OK, right, we're going to get another question now. This one is from Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Hi. Should Miss England bring back the swimwear parade?
OK, so this is another potentially interesting one regarding feminism, Diane. I'm going to come to you. This was the swimwear parade for Miss England, the beauty pageant, basically. They dropped it in 2009, and now they're thinking of bringing it back. Is it sexist, Diane?
No.
No?
Not in my opinion, because the women who want to do this, it's actually the contestants who want to bring back the swimwear round, because there's lots of different rounds involved in Miss England. You don't just turn up and sort of go, am I the prettiest, brainless bimbo here? No, it's actually been won by a doctor before. It's currently, Miss England, I think, is held by an engineering, aerospace student.
So it's more like the Krypton factor.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You need
very
to
intellectual. Very, very...
There's even a sports round, Andrew. I mean, I think
but isn't it right? So the argument would be, though, that this is degrading to women because you're objectifying women. You're saying that we should be valuing and judging people according to their looks.
We always value and judge people according to their looks. That happens to you no matter whether you are ugly, whether you are pretty. You are going to be judged the second anybody lays eyes on you. And do you know what? Those women work damn hard to get into the position they are. It doesn't just happen. They don't just magically turn up with abs and a beautiful walk and they have amazing hair and makeup. It takes hours of training, calorie counting, diets, gyms.
So you have no sympathy for the view of activists that say this is basically pulling women down, you know?
Do you know what? I have spoken a lot to a lot of grid girls because my husband loves motorsport and now I've got into it. And a lot of grid girls were removed from the grid.
Yes, I remember this.
Oh, God, they were upset. And they said, they said to me, my income's just been trashed by people who don't even come to motorsport.
Yeah.
By people who never watch. And it's the same thing. People who don't watch Miss World are saying, oh, you can't have these people parading around in bikinis. Oh, shut up. Do you know what it is? No, I get it. Julie Bindel and these activists who want to have the bikini round, they actually have a lot in common. They just want women to have the chance to be regarded in a meritocratic sense and not as the shadow of a man. They want a woman to be able to be assessed for who she is and to be an individual. And that takes many different forms, and that is what feminism is about. But the problem is that these two feminists are clashing with the best way of trying to realise what is the best way to be yourself.
Is there a class issue here? Because I remember when you mentioned the grid girls, I remember a TV interview where there was a very posh feminist berating a working-class grid girl, saying, you don't know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And it did strike... I was a bit uncomfortable. Although I sort of understood the argument, I was uncomfortable with the way she was treating this other woman.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that posh woman would have had far more opportunities in her life to, you know, had the time and resources to get an education and move into whatever career she wanted. Whereas if you're working class, as I am, you don't really have much option but to get your clothes off at a darts match.
I am. That's why you would. That's your excuse, anyway. Yeah.
But I've got to disagree with Diane. Like most women, she doesn't really know what she wants. She's talking crazy.
OK, before they come to blows, let's move on to another question. This one is from Sandra. Where's Sandra?
Yeah,
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. My question is... I've forgotten now.
Don't let us down, Sandra!
Oh, Sandra. It'll come to you if you just think about it.
Can LGBTQ people be compared to people, to slaves seeking freedom?
Oh, yeah, OK. So this story, I was astonished by. I don't know if you read this story. So this was this American real estate broker called Bob McCraney, and he put out this advert. You know how basically they're saying that LGBTQ rights are under threat in Republican states, and he's this realtor, and he's basically saying to gay people, look, if you want, I can get you out. I can get you to a Democrat state, but he called it a Rainbow Underground Railroad. Now, the Underground Railroad, of course, was about helping slaves to escape. I mean, it's so inappropriate, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, beyond inappropriate,
I mean, this
really.
is slightly minimising the plight that people went through under slavery. It's it's disgusting. For a start, the Underground Railroad wasn't conducted on floats in sparkly hot pants.
It wasn't.
So
no.
there's a few differences, and also, I mean, all right, there are. I mean, they call it restrictions on LGBTQ rights in certain states. If you look more closely, it's like, oh, you're not allowed to have pornography in school libraries. You know, it's laws laws like that. And it's like, well, that's actually a good idea. I think, you know, most gay people would agree with that.
And I mean, these people, the people who did the Underground Railroad to help the slaves, they weren't offering them better prices on their house. You know, it's so inappropriate. It's so inappropriate.
It's bizarre. It certainly suggests that this gentleman may have some kind of martyr complex.
Right,
Is it
yeah.
or like a hero complex where he's like, look at me, I am like Moses leading the gay people to freedom.
But isn't the point that black people during the slave trade, they were oppressed? Yes. Gay people living in present-day America aren't oppressed. That's the fundamental difference.
No, and what is interesting is exactly what Leo pointed out, actually. It's coming down to this encroaching ideology of sort of the transgender, the 72 genders, the identify as a cat, all of that kind of coming into sort of schools and young children.
Yeah.
And that's what they're pushing against. But they're not pushing against being gay. And there's a very big difference there.
Yeah, but also wanting to be a victim, sort of identifying yourself into a victim status, you know, saying that my experience is as bad as slavery, and of course it just isn't.
And this sometimes spills over into horrific incidents. When we saw a transgender woman or trans man went into a school and shot a Christian school and shot lots of pupils because of this sense of grievance, and because it's drilled into people. Oh, you're a victim. Everything's literal genocide against you.
Yeah, the hyperbole is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, these people are real, and you can see this grievance narrative in any sort of cult, any ideology that then commits atrocities. I mean, Islamism, for example.
OK, well, we're going to move on to another question now. This one is from Andrea. Where's Andrea?
Yes, me.
Andrea, sorry.
Does Bud Light deserve a marketing award?
See, I love Bud Light because they did the worst advertising campaign ever since Gillette. Do you remember when Gillette did an advert basically berating its customers for being male, and they lost millions? And then Bud Light did this Dylan Mulvaney advert, which basically berated its customers and sort of really insulted women by having a man prancing around who thinks he's a woman. So now we've got Bud Light, who lost $20 billion, by the way.
Yeah.
So Bud Light, because of this terrible campaign, they lost $20 billion. They've given themselves an award, or at least the person responsible, for Creative Marketer of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly pretty creative. I mean, nobody had thought of losing $20 billion before. It's certainly got them some coverage.
Yeah, that's the thing. They actually do deserve the marketing award because we are all talking about it. It has gone worldwide. It wasn't the profit award.
No.
It was the marketing
We
award.
are all talking about it, but what we're not doing is drinking Bud Light.
Yeah. No, but we know what Bud Light is. We know it's there. We don't. It might be a thing that we hate, but we know it exists. It's in our minds. I'm sure at some point one of our presenters will be setting fire to cans of Bud Light.
I'm sure the shareholders share your view on that. OK, so anyway, next on Free Speech Nation, it's 75 years since the Empire Windrush ship brought hundreds of people from Jamaica to Britain. Author Rakib Hassan will be here to discuss the lasting significance of their arrival. Don't go anywhere.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. This week marks the 75th anniversary of the arrival at Tilbury Docks of the Empire Windrush ship, which brought hundreds of people from Jamaica to the UK. They and many other Caribbean immigrants who arrived in the UK over the following years became known as the Windrush generation and have done much to shape modern Britain, despite facing racism and intolerance at times. Joining me to discuss the huge significance of the Windrush arrivals, I'm joined by the social policy analyst and author of a new book, Beyond a Grievance: What the Left Gets Wrong About Ethnic Minorities, Rakib Ehsan. Thanks for joining me, Rakib. I want to ask you first, specifically about the Windrush generation. You wrote a fascinating article for Spiked this week. Now, when these people arrived, they were, of course, invited. Britain wanted people to come here, but they've nonetheless faced incredible racism and hostility. What happened there?
No, absolutely, Andrew. As I wrote in my piece for Spike, these were optimistic and dynamic migrants. Many had connections with the British military, or indeed had served themselves in Allied efforts to defeat Nazism and fascism in the Second World War. Over time, the Windrush generation, some responded to job advertisements which were directly circulated by the UK government to fill vacancies in the various sectors such as healthcare and transport. But there was that affection there that they was returning to the mother of the empire. But as I also wrote in the piece, the reception to their arrival in the UK was not necessarily welcoming and hospitable. There's hostility ranging from churches to the trade unions. Many faced a great deal of discrimination. There was the 1958 Notting Hill riots, where so-called teddy boys were encouraging white British residents to keep Britain white. But then over time, when you move into the 1960s with the passage of race relations legislation, the situation did improve over time, and that did facilitate the integration of migrants, which was a real positive development.
And a lot of these people, of course, were very well educated, were coming here and doing really much needed jobs, and yet they still had to put up with this hostility. But it does just go to show, doesn't it, how far we've come.
Oh, no, absolutely. And that's a point that I've made on numerous occasions, Andrew, that when you look at the kind of in-your-face racism that was faced by members of the Windrush generation back in those days, we've really made fantastic progress when it comes to racial equality in our country. And that was demonstrated in a new report published by British Future, which showed that a comfortable majority of ethnic minority Brits feel that over the last 25 years, we've made significant progress when it comes to racial equality. And 80% of ethnic minority Brits believe that it's better to live in Britain as an ethnic minority when compared to other countries such as USA, France and Germany. And that's something that I've argued for some time, that Brexit Britain actually outperforms a range of EU member states such as France, Germany and the Netherlands when it comes to providing anti-discrimination protections on the grounds of race, ethnicity and religion.
So to what extent do you think that the Windrush generation in of themselves helped to forge that progress that the country has gone through as a whole?
Well, I think that originally, when you look at the anti-racism movement, I think the anti-racism movement, by the way, it has truly lost its way in recent times, because much of it has brainlessly imported US racial identity politics. But back in the 1950s and 60s, you had legendary figures such as Salieri Constantine, who really did do fantastic work in terms of, fighting racial discrimination and pressing for legislation which would help the social, economic, and political integration of ethnic and racial minorities living in this country.
Now, things all seem to go a bit wrong a few years ago when Theresa May introduced this hostile environment policy, and this had a direct impact on some of the Windrush generation. There were people who were told that they don't belong here, that they had to go back. Was this, you will recall, of course, this huge governmental error, but were critics right to interpret that as racism, or was that just incompetence?
I think that when we look at the Windrush scandal, there's a great deal of administrative incompetence. But I think the issue that when you look at that in the broader context of the hostile environmental policy, I think that people ultimately, when they look at immigration, what they want competence, and they want it to be properly managed. I don't think that was the case when we look at the Windrush scandal, because ultimately we were looking at people who were being discriminated against, people who had provided a great deal of loyal service to the country, especially in sectors, as I said, in healthcare and transport. I think that my main worry is that the level of damage it did to already disaffected communities of Black Caribbean origin, especially communities that felt that, for example, the Metropolitan Police Service in London had grossly mismanaged the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence. So I do think that there are lessons to be learned from the Windrush scandal, and we have to really speed up that process of compensation as well, which has been far too slow and inefficient.
Can I ask you about your book, Beyond Grievance, What the Left Gets Wrong About Ethnic Minorities? It's quite a provocative title, potentially. Might be upsetting some people on the left. But I'm going to ask you, what do the left get wrong?
I think they get a great deal wrong, Andrew, to the time. I think you're fantastic at highlighting that yourself. But I think looking at it from my point of view, and in terms of what I've written in my new book, Beyond Grievance, it's that tension between what I consider to be a radical cultural liberalism, which has taken hold on the modern British left, and the more patriotic and traditional sentiments that you'll find in many British ethnic minority communities. So I talk a great deal about family values. I also talk about how ethnic minority people in the UK, a lot of them don't want to be seen as victims in their own country. They belong to robust family units. They really want to strive to do better and make the most of the opportunities that they're provided in British democracy. And as I said earlier, they're very much aware of the protections and freedoms that they're provided in their country compared to ethnic minorities living in other countries such as France and Germany. So I think that what the book offers is a more positive account of Britain's record on race relations and more broadly on matters of equality. And it really, what it is, it instructs the left that when you're looking at inequalities, not to look at everything through the prism of race, also look at social class, or even things such as, it might sound a bit boring, but things like living in a geographically isolated community. I think things like that are far more important when it comes to shaping life chances in modern day Britain.
You mentioned that we have a tendency here to import narratives about race from the US and kind of impose them onto our own situation and the problems with that. But if I could mention Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo believes that actually in our present day, things are worse for ethnic minorities than they were during the period of Jim Crow, because her argument is that at the time of Jim Crow, it was all overt. You could see the racism, but now it's been subsumed, so it's often invisible, and it's happening even if you can't see it. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I think in the British context, I make the point in the book, there's still improvements to be made. I talk about in the labour market that, names which are culturally distant sounding tend to fare worse than traditionally English sounding names, even when you control for work experience, skills and educational qualifications. I talk about having a more efficient and responsive healthcare system, which functions better in the face of having an ever diversifying population. I do talk about improving police-community relations as well. But I think that I think, for example, I think of Runnymede Trust in 2000, they published the Parrott Report. before, which provided the view that to suggest that racism was widespread in the Britain of 2000 was a partisan and skewed view. And then more recently, they published a report which said that our systems in England are deliberately rigged against ethnic minorities. I simply don't believe that. And I don't believe this argument that racial and ethnic minorities more generally in the Western world are worse off now compared to before.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the Runnymede Trust. They seem to have had a sea change from that attitude back in 2000. Is that just because activists have kind of seized that group as they have with every other think tank and charity?
I think it's a possibility. I think that there are organisations who perhaps their preservation is ultimately reliant on peddling this narrative that Britain is a fundamentally racist society. And I definitely disagree with that.
And yet, Rakib, there are examples where we do see quite overt racism. I mean, this story a few weeks ago about the post office and their guidelines, and they were using quite overtly horrific racist language. There's no getting around that.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I've even included it at the point in the book, for example, when you saw the blacklist being used to directly target members of the Gypsy and Traveller communities. So I do include episodes like that in the book. But I think that when you compare that to what I'd consider very aggressive forms of racial discrimination, when you're looking at violence, harassment and intimidation, I do think that we've made significant strides from that. But as I say in the book, I don't think I look at Britain through rose-tinted spectacles. I say that actually what we should strive to do is make these improvements in various spheres of British life, so we're the ultimate gold standard example of a successful multiracial democracy in the modern world.
Rakib Ehsan, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. So next on Free Speech Nation, top Irish journalist David Quinn will be here to discuss the potential ramifications of the hugely contentious hate crime bill. See you in a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day.
The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The Irish government is currently trying to pass a criminal justice bill, which has been the subject of some heated debate. Defenders of the bill have argued that the restrictions it apparently places on free speech are for the benefit of all. But critics of the bill say it contains worryingly authoritarian provisions. David Quinn, a columnist for the Sunday Independent, joins us to discuss the bill. David, thanks so much for joining us. Could you perhaps give us some kind of background to this bill? Because it hasn't been reported on as much as I would like in England.
Well, it hasn't been reported enough in Ireland either, actually. So this was introduced to replace, or is being introduced to replace, the Incitement to Hatred Act from 1989. And various NGOs decided it doesn't go far enough. We haven't had any prosecutions under the 1989 bill, and we need prosecutions because hate is on the increase in Ireland. And so this bill is currently working its way through the upper house, which is called the Senate over here. It's already gone through more or less through the lower house, and it went through by like 110 votes to 12. There was less of a debate than in Scotland, and there's all kinds of worrying aspects to the bill. We had Helen Joyce over here, by the way, a few weeks ago. It's probably familiar to your viewers, and she was extremely alarmed about it. So among the things it does is introduces obviously the concept of hate. It doesn't define hate. It introduces to one of the protected characteristics the idea of gender, but gender isn't defined. Apart from the idea of intention to cause hate, it has the idea that, well, okay, Andrew Doyle is not intending to cause hate, but he was reckless about it. So he should have known what the effect of his words or his writings were going to be. They can also take a hold of your computer or other electronic device on the grounds that you might have something hateful on it, and you're going to release this at any moment. And if you refuse to hand over your password, they can fine you €5,000. All kinds of alarming aspects.
I mean, there's so much in what you say there that is chilling. I mean, the idea that they can look at your computer, your phone, something like that, and they've come up with this idea that if you have the intent to share the material that could stir up hatred, that is a prosecutable offence. But firstly, how would they know what the intent is? And how are they defining what is hateful? Because we all have different ideas about what we find hateful.
Well, they can't do it. Now, the Justice Minister, Helen McEntee, she's reassuring everybody that everything will be okay in the night. So on the one hand, she's saying the bill is really badly needed because there's so much hate in Ireland. But on the other hand, she's saying, well, when the bill comes into force, it won't really affect all that many people. It'll only affect things at the extremes. But then why do we need to replace the Incitement to Hatred Act of 1989? So this isn't something that she can really explain. So this thing is going to go out into the wild, as it were, sometime in the next few months. And there's going to be all kinds of NGOs just dying to report people for so-called hate. And then we don't know what's going to happen because it'll go into court eventually. And we have to see what a court and the judge will do. But in the meantime, it's going to have this chilling effect. People are going to be terrified to have the police calling to their door. And that's enough to terrify most people into not speaking out on certain topics.
Well, the point is, I mean, hate crime legislation and hate speech laws across Europe, the common factor is that no one really knows how to define hate. And you're talking about the Irish government saying that it's only going to affect the most extreme instances. But when it comes to the gender debate, we hear activists all the time claiming that, for instance, being misgendered is equivalent to genocide. So they interpret things as being extreme, even when they're not. So how can we be sure that the courts won't do the same?
Well, and in the UK a few years ago, you probably recall, we had Graham Lenihan, who is one of the co-writers of Father Ted, and he had police visiting his door because he had, quote unquote, misgendered someone. And so we just wonder, will something like that happen in Ireland? Because all it takes is an activist to complain about you, and next minute the police might come to your door. I noticed in Scotland, by the way, even though they've passed the bill, it hasn't yet commenced, because police in Scotland say we don't have enough police to enforce this thing, because we don't really know what its scope is going to be. But here in Ireland, we have nearly 500 so-called diversity police officers trained and ready to go. And the police commissioner here keeps on saying, you know, we need this. He talks about 500 or 600 hate crimes last year, but actually when you delve into those figures, you discover an awful lot of them are so-called hate incidents, like the police record in Britain, where it's completely based on the perception of somebody that a hate incident has taken place. And it doesn't even have to be you who are the so-called victim of it. Somebody else can report that something was a hate incident. So this so-called 600 hate incidents are probably not really hate at all.
Well, and we've worked very hard over here to make sure that non-crime hate incidents are no longer a thing, because, of course, people were claiming it. They perceived prejudice where it didn't exist, and that was sufficient for people to have this against their name. But I want to ask you about this speech which went viral, which was Senator Pauline O'Reilly. Can I just hear about what she had to say? I'd like to hear your response on this. Can we play the clip?
When you think about it, all law, all legislation is about the restriction of freedom. That's exactly what we're doing here, is we are restricting freedom, but we're doing it for the common good. You will see throughout our Constitution, yes, you have rights, but they are restricted for the common good. Everything needs to be balanced. And if your views on other people's identities go to make their lives unsafe, insecure, and cause them such deep discomfort that they cannot live in peace, then I believe that it is our job as legislators to restrict those freedoms.
So restricting the freedoms of the population for the common good, where have we heard that before? Oh, in every single tyrannical regime that's ever existed. Can Pauline O'Reilly not see that what she's advocating for there is authoritarianism?
Well, I mean, she completely gave the game away, because the government itself is trying to minimise what this bill is going to mean in practice. And here we have somebody who's a member of one of the coalition parties, in this case the Greens, and she's saying it's enough that somebody feels unsafe or insecure and are uncomfortable, utterly subjective terms. And she says we can't live in a society where people who belong to certain protected groups feel unsafe, insecure or uncomfortable. So to my mind, that shows just how far-reaching this bill is potentially going to be. And what's really alarming is the lack of proper debate about it. So there's been some in the upper house, the Senate, but it's obviously less important. It's like your House of Lords. So the bill is ultimately going to sail through. There's some small possibility of some kind of amendment that might soften the blow of this thing a little bit. Our media here have mainly been in favour of it, are silent. Our equivalent of the BBC, RTE, has been nearly utterly silent about it. In fact, the weird thing is, here we are in GBNews, and GBNews is showing more interest in it than our national broadcaster is. And so most of the opposition to it within Ireland has been occurring on social media. So that clip you just showed is at something like 2 million views. Now, a lot of them are because people like you, Andrew, retweeted it. And like about 6 weeks ago, we had Elon Musk copying onto the bill. And we also had people like Jordan Peterson also copying onto the bill. So we've got these really big figures from overseas saying, hang on a minute, we've got a problem in Ireland. And the problem, by the way, in Ireland is we used to be the most Catholic country in the world, and now we're kind of moving over to being the most politically correct country in Ireland. So we're kind of overcompensating for it. But we're going from one type of authoritarianism in the past to a brand new form today.
I did want to ask you about that, David, because it does strike me that there is the activism within Ireland is far more extreme and aggressive and militant than you see even over here. And I wonder to what extent that was because you have this history of Catholicism, which was then sort of swept away in the public consciousness by the same-sex marriage. And then since then, you have politicians and the media class in Ireland using terms like unsafe, which is straight out of the lexicon of critical social justice, otherwise known as wokeness.
You see, I think Ireland is a country, because we're a small country, we're extremely consensus-driven. And I think what's turning out in Ireland is we kind of only allow one idea at a time. And if you don't go along with that idea, you're cancelled, you're silenced, you're not given platforms. And this happens in all kinds of informal ways like Britain. So all kinds of people now simply don't get invited to universities anymore to take part in debates. We had, by the way, a couple of years ago, Richard Dawkins was supposed to speak at Trinity College Dublin to the HIST Society, the Historical Society, which is apparently the oldest debating society in the world. But a new committee came in and they disinvited him because a few years ago he described Islam as the greatest force for evil in the world today. So they said we can't have him. But now what's coming along is So there's all kinds of informal ways of censoring people. So now they're going to come along with this bill, which is a formal way to do it. And ironically, a few years ago, Ireland got rid of the blasphemy law from its constitution. So you can say blasphemous things about God. But the new form of blasphemy is you can't say blasphemous things about certain minorities. So the ironic thing again is we've replaced this really strict kind of Catholic consensus with this extremely strict PC one. And the same people who kind of were extremely opposed to the church and its dominance are the same people who are introducing a lot of this sort of stuff. And they can see the irony and they can see the double standard involved.
David Quinn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So I just want to quickly ask my panel about this because I do find it interesting. Leo, you know, Scotland has passed a similar kind of hate crime bill, which is similarly draconian. Yeah. It talks about criminalising people for stuff they say in their own homes. It talks about the public performance of a play on stage, exactly.
So it could be terrible for comedy in Scotland. I mean, because it's all perception-led.
Yes.
It's, you know, if the victim or, you know, person who's supposed to be the victim or anybody else perceives something as being hateful, whatever that means, then it's a hate crime. It's, you know, that's...
And it feels like this is spreading. I mean, Diane, he mentioned Helen Joyce going over there, and Helen's been on this show, of course. She raised concerns that looking at this legislation, it seems that if you have a belief such as Helen does, that you can't change sex, that men and women are different, that could end up with a 5-year prison sentence.
Yeah, because it doesn't align with the group think.
Right.
And this is absolutely terrifying because, as David Quinn pointed out, and you pointed out, they have not defined what hate is. And even though he said, oh, the politician claims this is going to go for the more extremes, well, then define the extremes.
Yeah, but that's the problem, isn't it? They never seem to define it. Scotland's got a similar thing. So Humza Yousaf, who developed the Scottish hate crime bill, he talked about stirring up hatred. Yeah. But he never said what hatred meant. I mean, people send me hate every day on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I get them arrested? And if not, why not?
Probably, although it's reassuring to hear that Scotland is so disorganised and incompetent that they don't actually have the police capacity to deal with it. So we're going to be stymied by the reality of policing it. But yeah, some of the stuff, like to make it a crime to misgender someone, I mean, it can be pretty hard to tell what somebody's gender is these days if you can't see their Twitter bio where they've got it in brackets. I think, you know, if people don't want to be misgendered, they could make more effort to look like that gender. Like, why am I having to do the transition in my head? It's not my transition. At least put some lipstick on.
So you're saying the lesbians with beards that you see online, they should make more of an effort, or at least just get a shaver.
Yeah.
Like okay, is that fair enough, Diane?
Yeah.
I want you to get involved so you get in trouble as well.
Oh, all right then. Hey, identify as police phobic, and if the police knock on your door and they want your password, you say, I'm so sorry, but I am password sharing phobic and you're committing a hate crime by trying to break into my laptop.
Actually, Diane, that's a serious point. Like, if they're going to say that offence is the threshold, if you're offended by something, then we're going to investigate.
That means you've identified me as a criminal, you have misidentified me, so you should arrest yourself,
there we
sir.
go. Well, I do find authoritarianism offensive, to be honest, because it never works out, historically speaking, does it? Anyway, let's move on. We've got to take a break, but still to come on Free Speech Nation, we're going to have MPs dancing, Ben Elton hitting out at Rishi Sunak, and an elephant gets a new limb. It's almost time for social sensations. Don't miss it.
First and foremost, I am a GBNews fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, politicians have not been straight with us about the economy, and now we're all paying the price. When it comes to the nation's finances, we need some tough love, and for those that don't like it, tough luck. In My Take at 10, why are Tories drawing up plans to let children change their sex at school? Who's going to stand up to this woke madness? Also, 7 years on from Brexit, have Remainers been proved wrong? Plus, politics legend Anne Widdecombe, the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, and political commentator Annunziata Rees-Mogg. We're live from 9.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So it's time for social sensations as we take a quick look at what has been breaking the internet this week. So first up is this video, and I'm not sure what this is about. This is Conservative MP Peter Bone making his TikTok debut. Let's have a look. Well, I mean, you know, he's a lovely mover.
He's definitely made a TikTok debut. That's true.
But why are we interested in that kind of thing? Why does that go viral?
Yeah, what's he doing? Is there a message there? it seemed like a cross between a dance and getting told off by a head teacher.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. Have you seen?
My gosh, bring back Theresa May. I mean, when she did her funny little robot strut, that's the kind of thing I want to see my politicians
I think people were quite
doing.
mean about Theresa May, actually, because she was visiting a group of people who were dancing and she was just showing enthusiasm for the... I thought it was a nice gesture.
It was a great gesture and it was awful. So it was brilliant in both ways, because she was being really nice and at the same time I was like, oh my God, Theresa, stop it. This is a diplomatic incident.
OK. Well, look, we're going to move on. Speaking of Conservative MPs, PM Rishi Sunak spoke to the BBC this weekend, and then comedian Ben Elton was rather unimpressed. Let's have a look.
And if anybody was still watching after that extraordinary Orwellian, meaningless, evasive word salad, I mean, everybody else wanted to believe, and I sort of believe maybe he's kind of a bit more decent, you know, and it turns out he's as much of a mendacious, narcissistic sociopath as his previous.
Wow. So he's not pulling any punches there, is he?
No. I think it's a bit unfair on Rishi. I mean, Rishi has sort of come to power at the wrong time. He's sort of graphed the reins of a crumbling empire. But he's not doing a bad job. He's brought stability. He's he's quite young and sort of dapper. He gets photographed next to Zelensky a lot, which is they both like that because they're both about 4'8".
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Rishi's not actually. I think he'll be remembered as a pretty competent...
I think you make a very good point. Like, he has inherited this awful situation where you know, this global recession, just out of a pandemic. There's nothing really he can do. Is it fair to say he's mendacious, narcissistic and sociopathic? I mean, Ben Elton is diagnosing him there, which I think is a bit much.
I think sociopathic is a bit much, and I think it's a little bit hypocritical for him to say, oh, Orwellian word salad, and then he throws in 1,000,000 syllables in each word afterwards. It's like, sir, you just did the same thing. And I'm sorry, but Ben Elton has never been completely truthful with who he is. I was very disappointed, because I saw Ben Elton when I was a much younger stand-up, and he was there, oh, I talk like this on stage, and I talk like this, and then I saw him have an actual interview, and he spoke like this the whole time.
Really?
And I was like, no, and I felt heartbroken that he wasn't the person he was on stage.
Well, I mean, he used to rant about Thatcher all the time, very famously, but then he became quite Tory, didn't he?
Yeah, and also all comedians, even though they say when they're on stage, they're like, oh, I'm so socialist, I'm so left-wing, I believe in sharing everything, I'm a nice guy, oh, please like me, please like me. In reality, they're all total self-starting Thatcherite entrepreneurs going out and hustling for work in a free market. And when they get paid cash, they stick it under the mattress and they don't pay tax in it because they'd rather keep that money for themselves than the NHS get another kidney machine.
Yeah, we love comedians on this programme, don't we? And not bitter at all. OK, finally, this heartwarming video, which has been viewed millions of times, showing the wonders of modern science. This is an elephant using a prosthetic foot.
About to go put it on Chook, the Asian elephant. Follow me. Chook sadly lost his foot to a snare when he was young and was rescued by the Wildlife Alliance and lives at their rescue centre in Cambodia. So the team provide him a prosthetic foot every 6 months, which my family charity Paradise Wildlife Park donates the funds for. And there you have it, a prosthetic foot for Chook, the Asian elephant. And now he's able to walk, run and swim freely without any pain.
That's very sweet, isn't it, Leo? You're going to say something cynical, no doubt.
No, not at all. No, I think we should have a Paralympics for elephants now. This is going to be great.
I think I would actually watch that.
But I'm just amazed that somebody thought they could, because he got his foot caught in a snare. Who's trying to catch elephants with a snare? That's, I mean, because once...
I don't think it was designed for the elephant, was it? I think he accidentally put his foot in another kind of snare.
Oh, right.
I imagine that's...
so the guy finds the elephant in the snare and then has to deal with this massive elephant.
No, I don't think that's what happened there. What do you...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a lovely story, and I like when human beings get involved in nature in this way. Like,
yes.
I have been campaigning for years to build steps for penguins, and I think that we should really... Thank you, sir. I think that we should get involved in nature. Like, when we see, like, animals fighting, just break it up, give them a little bit of food.
Yeah, calm down, lads. Don't worry about it. It's not worth it.
Give them some vegan sausages.
Yeah.
Look, there you go, Mr. Lion.
I didn't know you were such a philanthropist. Oh, well, that's lovely. OK, well, look, this is the part of the show where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. Thank you so much for emailing in, as you always do. Our first dilemma comes from Georgina, who says, hello, Andrew. Hello, Georgina. My surname is Da Silva, but my fiancé's surname is Piles. He says we can't get married if I don't take his surname, but I can't bring myself to become Georgina Piles. What should I do? Well, I mean, if you love him, I guess you take the name.
If he loves her, why is he forcing her to change her
there's an
name?
obvious solution for both of them. Piles of silver.
It's brilliant.
Piles of silver.
Yeah.
Yeah, OK, that would work.
Yeah.
We've solved that. Perfect. Let's move on to that. Yeah, you're welcome, Georgina. The next one is from Morgan. Now, Morgan says, yesterday at work, I was walking down a long corridor and a colleague ahead held the door for me. When I got to the door, I said, thank you. However, my colleague raised their eyebrows and muttered, took your time. Is it rude not to speed up when you see someone holding a door open for you? I kind of think, just leave me alone. Get out of my life. Like, if I'm walking towards the door and I've got to walk faster to get to the door, I'd rather they just went away.
Yeah.
Really annoys me.
Because actually doors aren't that difficult to open.
No, I can do it myself.
They're very much designed to be opened and closed by a person.
Yeah, how dare these people patronise us?
It's the issue with eye contact, though. If you have made eye contact with a person, that person has gone, I acknowledge your existence, you've acknowledged their existence, oh my God, the door is too far away, they're not speeding up, and now it looks like I've slammed the door in your face.
So what you should do is just not make eye contact. Just
Never make eye
walk
contact
by
with
looking
anybody.
down.
Blinkers.
OK, that solved that one. Well, look, thanks for joining us. For Free Speech Nation, this was the week when Bud Light gave themselves a pat on the back for losing $20 billion. Ireland's draconian hate speech bill edged a bit closer to reality, and everyone was talking about cats in schools. Thank you to my panel, Diane Spencer and Leo Kearse, and to all of my guests this evening. And if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful studio audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. That's there on the screen right now. Come along Stay tuned, by the way, for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's coming up next. And please don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's top stories. Thanks for watching Free Speech Nation. See you next week.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. After a very warm, hot, even weekend, there are signs of a change on the way into the new working week. Behind this cold front, our winds are shifting more to a westerly direction. That's helping to feed in some less humid and slightly fresher air across the UK. Whilst this cold front is still with us, though, there is still the chance of some heavy outbreaks of rain across northeast England, northeast Scotland throughout the start of this overnight period, but tending to turn drier for everyone, apart from a few showers across the far northwest. But with those fresher conditions in place, temperatures will be a notch lower